Welcome to Ripple Effect Connection. I'm Level 3 Integrative Health Practitioner Christy Hugic. If you've been tuning in for a while, welcome back. If you're new here, this is a podcast I created because throughout my own growth and personal journey, I've been fortunate to learn from some incredibly generous and skilled individuals who openly shared their invaluable wisdom with me. So my goal is to link you to the message and the messenger. We are in the final episode of Season 2, and I am just beyond thrilled with how many people have reached out to say Episode X really made a difference for me, or I passed along Episode Y to my daughter or friend. That is truly the ripple effect and what I intended when I created the podcast. On today's episode, we're diving into something near and dear to my heart, coffee. After all, it's the world's most popular beverage, and according to a 2024 study, over 2.25 billion cups are consumed every single day. Knowing that, we should probably know, is coffee a friend or a foe when it comes to our health? In Season 1, I spoke to Andrew Salisbury, the CEO of Purity Coffee, to talk about the many benefits of coffee, especially high-quality, third-party, mold-tested, organic coffee. But today, I want to be fair and explore if there's a flip side to this story. Could your beloved brew and mine be affecting cholesterol? The context of this conversation revolves around a recent trip to the coffee shop. If you know me, you know that's actually a common occurrence. I love everything about the coffee shop experience. The coffee, the connection, the chill nature of it. In fact, my husband and I make sure we have at least one coffee date a month at a new coffee shop in the area we've never been to. So yes, I'm a coffee fan. On a Saturday, we ventured to downtown Orlando to try a coffee shop called Lineage. First of all, love this place. Gluten-free, vegan options for food, and they use filtered water, which means reverse osmosis and remineralized water to make their coffee. I consider that first class. In fact, if you go get a water right next to the counter, it's a filtered water faucet. As I was sipping my iced almond milk matcha latte, I overheard a man at the counter talking to the barista. He mentioned his LDL cholesterol had gone up on recent labs, and a functional medicine practitioner on social media, in quotes, suggested his unfiltered coffee habit, one he had had for over a decade, might be the reason. His reaction? What do you think? Of course he did. He made that correlation. He said, I've been drinking unfiltered coffee for 12 years. This is why my cholesterol is high. That got me thinking. This was research that I was not familiar with, and I kind of wanted to know the answer myself. What research is this, and is there validity to it? So in this episode, we're going to do two things. First, we'll break down why studies and sensational headlines often need more context. Then we'll look at how you can take thoughtful, personalized steps to eliminate the coffee confusion based on what the research actually says. In this day and age, it is very common for news entities to pick up on a recent study and conjure up a short clickbait headline that only tells part of the story. So here, the headline read, "Coffee raises LDL cholesterol." But it's important to pause and ask, what does the research actually say? That's where critical thinking and context come in. This doesn't mean you should ditch the daily Java. In fact, you will hear in many of these studies, and you can read them all for yourself because I've linked them in the notes, many studies will conclude that regular coffee consumption is associated with lower all-cause mortality. So let's unpack the studies behind this concern before we panic and send our nervous system into a tailspin because you think, oh my God, I've got to break up with my morning friend. The particular research this man referenced was a 1991 PubMed study looking at compounds in coffee called diterpenes, specifically cafestol and kawiol, found in the oils of the coffee. They are natural compounds. Diterpenes are natural compounds that can increase LDL cholesterol, especially in unfiltered coffee. But here's the key. They're largely filtered out when coffee is brewed with paper or cloth filters. That means if you're drinking a French press, a Turkish coffee, espresso, maybe you're using the boiling water method or using certain types of cold brew, those diterpenes will remain in your cup and therefore in your body. A cup of unfiltered coffee can contain up to 30 times more diterpenes than a cup of filtered coffee. But even then, most of the studies showing a significant impact with these diterpenes and LDL cholesterol looked at people drinking 4 or more cups of unfiltered coffee a day. Not 1 cup, not 2 cups, 4 or more. So unless you're heavily caffeinated and doing that daily, the risk may not be what you think. And if you're drinking 4 or more cups of coffee a day, we need to have a talk and dig into the whys around that. Interestingly, if you continue to dive deeper into diterpenes, some studies even show that these have anti-inflammatory, anti-diabetic, and anti-cancer properties. So the cafestol and the kawiol, they can do good things too. So like most things in nutrition, it's not black or white. Based on the research though, we want to ask the question, should the man in the coffee shop change his brewing methods and coffee consumption based on the recent cholesterol numbers he got? So let's look into this. What else raises LDL? It's never just about your LDL or your cholesterol numbers. We never look at one lab marker in isolation in functional medicine. There are so many other things that can also contribute to high cholesterol in this day and age that we live in. So we have to always look at the body as a system. We don't even know what his version of high cholesterol actually was in this case. I didn't get that deep into the conversation with him, but it could have been a number inside an optimal functional medicine range. But when we see higher cholesterol numbers, usually over 250, we want to start piecing together the puzzle by asking, what are the triglycerides? What is the HDL? What's the makeup of the cholesterol, meaning particle size and pattern size, which is something I venture to guess that his doctor or maybe your doctor has never really discussed with you to assess a true risk for cardiac events. The next question would be, how's the liver function? Or your thyroid? The liver, short description of what the liver does, the liver converts cholesterol into bile acids, which are then secreted into the bile and then expelled from the body. So that could be a reason for higher cholesterol. Thyroid hormones also affect the processing of cholesterol in the body because that affects the liver connection, and the list goes on. So LDL can be elevated for many reasons: stress, inflammation, poor detoxification, low thyroid function, or impaired bile flow. It's also important to remember that inflammation is frequently at the root of chronic disease, not high cholesterol. So before blaming the coffee, we would want to ask a few questions. What kind of coffee are you drinking? What filtering method are you using? How many cups are you drinking a day? What water are you using to brew it with? Is it mold-free? Moldy coffee, for example, can be high in ochratoxin A, which is a mycotoxin or a gas that comes from the mold. That would promote inflammation and could be a bigger driver of systemic issues than the diterpenes themselves. And most importantly, maybe, what's your overall diet look like? In short, we tend to quickly demonize cholesterol, and it's actually something the body needs. There's way more to it. Someday, we'll dig into the relevancy of LDL to heart disease risk also and talk about different views of cholesterol on this podcast, because there are a lot of antiquated views about cholesterol out there. Now, this is where having a functional medicine practitioner can help you sort through the confusion. How does this affect my body? What is happening in my body? This is something I help clients with all the time. Sometimes it's just educating about getting the proper labs to order, and at the end of the day, the answer to the most important question: how do my coffee habits affect me? So let's bring this into the present day with a larger, more recent study that maybe adds some more valuable context to help you decipher next steps. So I'm talking about more recent. We're talking about a study from April of 2020 from the European Journal of Preventive Cardiology. They followed over 500,000 people for 20 years. Large study, long time. In that study, filtered coffee was associated with lower rates of heart disease and mortality, especially for people under 60. That benefit dropped off in people drinking 5 or more cups a day, even if it was filtered. The study was observational. What does that mean? That means the researchers observed habits but didn't control variables. We don't know what else was going on in these situations. What were they eating? What were the other habits that were going on? We can't prove causation, but it still gives us some helpful trends. Now, here's where it gets even deeper. There's also research showing that any type of coffee, even filtered, may increase cholesterol if the consumption exceeds 3 or more cups a day. I've also included that study for you in the show notes. So, okay, what do we do with all this information? What are the takeaways from this and the action steps that I should take? To generalize and say that coffee is bad for cholesterol isn't really the right thing to do here. Too much of anything in excess can be a red flag. That includes water. There are ways to make coffee work for you, not against you. Moderation is key. So I think one thing we can glean from all these studies together is that coffee consumption can be a good thing. Overconsumption can maybe start to turn it in the other direction. So we think we've all agreed less than 3 cups a day. Have your 1 or 2 cups of coffee. I think you're good no matter which kind of method that you use. Use a paper filter when you can. Enjoy the espresso, the French press, or Turkish coffee as an occasional treat, but not your daily go-to. I should also mention there are actually ways that you can use a paper filter in a French press or with Turkish coffee, even with espresso. So there are ways you can do that if you're making it at home. And if you're curious, you have a cholesterol problem. Let's just say you do have high cholesterol. Your doctor says, we need to do something about it. If you're curious how coffee is affecting your cholesterol, try eliminating unfiltered coffee for 8 to 12 weeks and then have your cholesterol retested. That's real biofeedback, not fear-based guessing. So, in conclusion, what did I do in response to this information that I actually didn't have before I dived deep? I actually did start to think about, hey, I do drink a lot of French press. I've got a paper filter in the French press now. I may be going to use the AeroPress a little more often. So I'm making some changes too because my cholesterol tends to run on the higher side. And some of that is the body just having issues clearing the cholesterol. So at the end of the day, I don't think coffee's bad. I don't think you have to give it up. I think it should be looked at like everything else. In moderation wins. If you enjoyed today's episode, I'd love to hear from you. Connect with me on social media and let me know what resonated most. I am Whole Health Christy on Instagram and Facebook, and you can find full show notes at christyhugic.com/podcast. If you found value in this episode, please take a moment to like, follow, review, and share the podcast with anyone who might benefit. A quick review on Apple Podcasts goes a long way in helping me bring more amazing guests your way. Stay tuned for the next episode of Ripple Effect Connection. Together, let's create waves of change.